Captain Planet was a revolutionary creation with a motive that worked out and delivered the message to the viewers about fighting against the elements that were slowly destroying the planet. Various events have indicated the true strength of his character, as he could be a lot more powerful at times than he tends to show. And that's just because the elements that bind him keep him on the positive side. But what if the elements that brought out such a superhero were corrupted? What if each element became the antithesis of what they were supposed to represent? Such a thing would result in the birth of the perfect villain, who can stand against Captain Planet and challenge him. Let's do a deep dive into the arc of this villain, Captain Pollution, and see how he stands opposite to the savior of the Earth, Captain Planet. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Toxic Genesis. Who is Captain Pollution? Captain Planet resulted from the Earth's need to save itself, but Captain Pollution was about the planet's torment. Born to corrupt, Captain Pollution was not brought through by unity, but by the engineering of some individuals who had the worst plans for the planet and intended to use its resources as the spoils of war. The creators of the eco-villains managed to channel their pools of environmental destruction powers and formed a rendition of the hero that turned out to be an abomination. Whenever Pollution appears with his jaundiced skin, cracked like the scorched earth itself, and hair that seems like a mop of fumes, the world around him sickens. It's as if he represents everything that could go wrong with the Earth, and much worse. The child of the worst that can strike the planet, Pollution is the very god of the elements that made him, and is the absolute form that can only be faced by his twin, Captain Planet. And the very fact that these two are similar to each other in the very manner they are dedicated to completely opposite causes makes their battles a lot more striking than the other such events. Captain Planet usually imagines that he is just another enemy, and that's where he goes wrong, because the very thing that they strive for stands as the weakness of each other. You have to agree that Captain Pollution is indeed the ideal villain for our hero, not only because of the plot convenience, but because he stands for the very events that continue to affect the Earth. He stands for every single event that causes a major disaster and continues to fuel the destruction, the very destruction that Gaia feared.
These toxic chemicals feel wonderful.
Origins of a biohazard. The creation of Captain Pollution. To understand Captain Pollution, we must visit Captain Planet's rogues gallery to find villains who pose a threat as deeply symbolic as the hero. Most of the time, the villains have primarily covered one aspect of the industrial manner in which the Earth's eco-balance has been disrupted. The very powers being used to save the planet and heal it could be inverted to create something that could be used to destroy and pollute the Earth. One of the most significant names associated with this destructive mindset are the brilliant and dangerous scientist Dr. Blight. Dr. Blight is an intellectually dangerous figure who has often used her mind towards technology that can be used to destroy the peace of Earth. And each time, she has proved that her ability to weaponize science was too much for Captain Planet to deal with. Unlike other villains like Duke Nuke or Sly Sludge, Blight operates with a cold and calm precision, and her AI assistant, Mal, is the very mirror of her intellect, reinforcing her theme. Blight is so calculated that she doesn't just observe the planet's weakness, but studies its protectors and defenders and uses that knowledge to crack the rules of creation itself. Captain Pollution was created based on these notes and the information she had gathered. With an explosive event, his origin mark, most creations or destructive origins, was associated with a rabbit. Yes, you heard it right. A rabbit. In the two-part event episode, Mission to Save Earth, Dr. Blight conducts an experiment using her duplicator machine, where she converts a normal rabbit into an evil one. It becomes clear to her and her colleagues that they have created something that is the antithesis of the individual being operated upon, making an unstable and aggressive creation. But that's not where it ends, because they realize they can use the same logic and corrupt Captain Planet's power source, making weapons dedicated to corruption and pollution. Blight, along with Duke Nuke, Sly Sludge, Verminous Scum, and Loot and Plunder, orchestrates the plan to acquire the rings of the Planeteers. They manage to create a false distress alarm that makes the Planeteers reach them for rescue, only to be gassed and put to sleep. After getting a hold of the rings, Blight feeds them into her duplicator machine, which leads to the creation of the very antithesis of the rings that are supposed to save the world. The resulting rings of destruction are deforestation from Earth, super radiation from fire, smog from wind, toxins from water, and hate from the heart. Yes, we now have heard the anti-versions of the Planeteers, and each villain uses the rings as personal weapons, being used to their tendency of fighting separately. But Mal, the AI companion, observes that there's a larger potential in the rings being brought together, just like the way it summoned Captain Planet upon being united by the Planeteers in their original form. So, the villains unite their unholy creations, and Captain Pollution is born. From the moment you look at Captain Pollution, it becomes clear that this being is everything that Captain Planet works against. The villainy becomes quite obvious when the first action after being born is not speech, but a manic laugh that doesn't signal the arrival of a new existence, but an ominous presence. While that might have been the very first action of proving its being, next up, Captain Pollution is ready to test his powers, and the villains have a plan. They dispatch him to attack Commander Clash, an ally of the Planeteers, and it's here that we witness absolute recklessness. However, the Planeteers, after managing to get out of the trap they were put in, manage to discover more aspects of this being that prove him to be the antithesis to Captain Planet, particularly the fact that his major weaknesses include all the pure natural elements: sunlight, clean water, and even soil. Each of these factors wounded him, and thus the factors that work in favor of Captain Planet are the very factors that could be used against him. The Planeteers acquire the rings back and summon Captain Planet to go against this whole new enemy. Now, Planet tends to underestimate his enemies, and that's what happens here when Pollution manages to overpower him. It only worsens when Blight joins in with her pollution pod, further weakening Captain Planet. But the fight isn't over, because Captain Planet has his friends, and the Planeteers use an ionizer weapon to clear the toxins out of his system. Captain Planet is once again purified and ready to go against the enemy, but this time he decides to use the very elements that helped him against the enemy instead of going for brute strength. Captain Planet turns things around by using the pure elements one by one against his toxic twin, and Pollution starts disintegrating under the weight of purity and finally returns to the rings of destruction, only to be annihilated when the rings implode. Thus, the villains who had gathered using their totems are disbanded by this failure, and it marks the end to Captain Pollution. But this is temporary. There's no way they will let go of this weapon they have created that works completely against Captain Planet and almost managed to defeat the superhero.
Ed, make my day.
Polluted Rampage. Captain Pollution's arc across episodes. Captain Pollution's return was an accident, not planned by the villains who had created him. A storm-ravaged sea wrecks Plunder's ship, dumping barrels of toxic waste into the island where Captain Planet first defeated Pollution. The Planeteers realized that this island being polluted could have a terrible outcome because of its history. Captain Planet is sent to inspect the events, only for him to trigger the re-emergence of Pollution accidentally. The rings are reconstituted using nuclear waste, and the 5 points where each of the rings was destroyed start glowing again. And this is when Captain Pollution emerges, not as someone who was summoned, but as someone who was triggered by the environmental corruption. This time, Pollution has a strategy in mind, as it uses each destruction as a power source and turns the entire landscape into its playground. Each act of destruction results in the weakening of Captain Planet, thus making the circumstances completely in favor of Pollution. Once he manages to put down Captain Planet, he targets his next act of destruction to be the reigniting of the Kuwaiti oil fires. Planet fails to catch up with him because of his need to repair each act of destruction, and as he goes through them, he continues to be weakened. When he reaches Pollution's next target, he is once again weakened by the state of things there as clouds of smoke fill the sky. In this manner, Pollution continues to cause chaos worldwide, but never really stays back to see the outcome of his work, while the others suffer the consequences and Planet tries to find the solution. It's almost as if he has a particular scheme wherein he plans to weaken Planet with each act of destruction, and by the time he is done, Planet will be completely drained of his powers. Meanwhile, the acts of destruction impact the Planeteers too, as they start arguing with each other while being struck themselves. Finally, Ma-Ti calms them down and encourages them to cooperate and unite again. But as they reforge their bonds, Captain Planet weakens with each destruction, strongly impacting them. So he regroups with the Planeteers to strategize instead of being defeated in the scheme that Pollution was putting them through. As Pollution continues to expose itself to corrupt elements, Captain Planet decides to counter it with vulnerability again and expose Pollution to the natural elements. The plan works, and once again, Captain Pollution is robbed of his polluted environment and disintegrates. But his arc doesn't end here, as we witness another appearance from Captain Pollution in the Captain Planet and the Planeteers arc, where we witness a much more brutal rendition of his final canonical appearance. Once again, Blight plays a key role in her comeback as she manages to brainwash the Planeteers and make them use their powers against Gaia. When she manages to get a hold of their rings and uses them to power the fabrication of the evil counterparts. The dark inversions that had once been used to create Captain Pollution are once again brought to life, and each of the eco-villains gets a hold of a ring to replace the traditional elemental powers. Gaia tries to control the circumstances, but Blight, the only one who doesn't get a hold of Gaia's powers, lashes out at her. They use their newfound corrupted rings to unite and once again give rise to Captain Pollution in his final incarnation. Before things could get much worse, the Planeteers managed to break out of the control they were put into and then use their rings to summon Captain Planet. Now, Planet had faced Pollution quite a few times, and each time Planet had been defeated during their first altercation. So this time, Planet plans things out immediately. He retreats into the rings, and while the others think it's out of cowardice, it becomes clear that it's a psychological game that Planet is trying to play against him. With Planet no longer emerging, the Planeteers try to fight him off with their elemental assault and strike Pollution from all sides. Ma-Ti uses her element of heart not as a weapon but as a statement of consequence, and she uses it to force Pollution to experience every single pain and damage that he had caused and makes him suffer in a matter of seconds. This element, being used in this manner, completely cancels out the essence that drove Pollution, the element of hate. Captain Pollution ceases to exist without any remains, and for once, it feels like he is gone forever. The rings of destruction lose their purpose and melt at once.
I needed a good shower.
Elemental opposites. Captain Planet versus Captain Pollution. As we saw, Captain Pollution's abilities have an interesting parallel to Captain Planet's, in that they are derived from environmental destruction and toxic forces instead of natural elements which drive Captain Planet. So, based on that fact, it's impossible to study Captain Pollution's abilities and weaknesses without drawing comparisons from our friend Captain Planet. While both are elemental creations, one is derived from the harmony of the Planeteer's 5 rings, while the other is animated from the idea of destruction and environmental degradation. You can guess which one's which. One of the major driving forces of Captain Planet was the element of heart, which prevents him from feeling like he is the most powerful being in the world, and thus becoming someone who destroys his enemies using his immense power. The aspect of heart makes him empathetic to his enemies, and that's why he intends to change his enemies from within instead of destroying or annihilating them. At the same time, Captain Pollution's major driving force, based on one element that is quite less tangible, is hate. And that's why he is a lot more cruel and narcissistic, making him destructive. He becomes a parasitic element because he can also corrupt others using his ability, the same way he can amplify the elements through which he was created. However, these things also indicate how they are driven against each other and can prove to be each other's weaknesses. There was a particular episode where Captain Planet had to go against Hitler, and the very presence of his hateful aura proved to weaken Captain Planet. Similarly, the positivity and the exposure to the healthier versions of the elements can weaken Captain Pollution. And each time the two have battled, Captain Planet has had to use this concept to defeat Pollution. To some extent, it has proved effective. But the one thing that makes him different from Captain Planet is that while his immunity from the various toxins does manage to give him an edge over Planet, it ends up proving that he lacks durability when confronted by the forces of the clean environment. Exposure to pure water, fresh air, or factors like positive elemental energy can have a stronger impact on weakening him than expected. Being mentally unstable further reduces the chances of him successfully dealing with these scenarios, and the lack of cohesion, while making him a bit more powerful, makes him vulnerable to unified resistance. That last bit was witnessed when the Planeteers managed to put him down in a well-planned manner.
Muscle man, all wrong! Nobody tells Captain Pollution what to do!
Marvelous verdict. Captain Planet and Captain Pollution aren't just opposing ideas, but a lot more than that, as they are ethically opposite to each other in various aspects. While one of them is defined by restraint, cooperation, and preservation, the other requires excess, destruction, and domination. If Captain Planet stands for every move that is made in favor of saving the Earth, then Captain Pollution stands against him in every possible manner in which the Earth is put to harm. Well then, you have a choice to be either, because this battle continues in the real world, and whatever the conspirators may say, Captain Planet is indeed needed to save the Earth. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe out there. Thanks, everyone.